but my name is Jade Clemens. I'm a senior program manager with Antikythera. I'm going to cover just a few housekeeping items before we really begin. One, this session is being recorded. Two, today's agenda is pretty simple. We're going to begin with a few team introductions, and then that will be followed by a talk from Antikythera Director Benjamin Bratton. After Benjamin concludes, then we'll begin the Q&A portion. And a few folks have already submitted questions during the registration process. We'll try to keep those in mind as well when we get to the Q&A session. So without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce Stephanie Sherman, Associate Director with Antikythera. Stephanie, go ahead and take it away.
Well, hi, everyone. As Jade said, I'm Stephanie Sherman, an Associate Director of Antikythera, and I want to also welcome Ben Cervani and Studio Director Nikolai Boyajev. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the session today. Thank you so much for joining us. Antikythera is a program reorienting planetary computation as a philosophical, technological, and geopolitical force. And from our base at the Berggruen Institute and in partnership with One Project, we're very excited to be launching the Antikythera Studio this February, when we will begin speculative design research and project development through writing, cinema, software, policy proposals, strategy, and more. And I'll turn it over to Antikythera Director and Philosophy of Technology, Benjamin Bratton, to tell you a little bit more about the program.
Thanks, Stephanie, and thanks, Jade, for the introduction. Thanks, Nikolai and Ben, for joining us. Thanks also for you for joining us in this, introduction to the program and question and answer session today. I'm going to go over a little bit of the sort of the intellectual agenda of the program, what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then we'll spend the bulk of the time talking a little bit more about process, about the application process, about who should apply, how they should apply, what they would be doing when they come and work with us, and some of the goals that we have for that collaboration. So let me, without further ado, share my screen. And great. Okay, so there we should get our friends out of the way. All right. Sorry, let me resize this a little bit. Okay, so Antikythera. This is not cooperating. My apologies. There we go. All right, Antikythera. So this is our homepage for the website, which is Antikythera.xyz. All of the information about the program, about the research themes in which we'll be focusing on, the contributors, those are the affiliate researchers, their bios, the studio schedule and process, and our other partners can be found here. You can also find links to our social media presence and sign up for our newsletter. So let me talk a little bit about what Antikythera is. Antikythera, as Stephanie said, is a program to reorient the direction of particularly planetary computation as a geopolitical, technological, and perhaps for our program, most importantly, philosophical force. The Antikythera mechanism was arguably the first computer, depending on how one would define this. It's probably from about 200 BC, was discovered of the island of Antikythera in Greece in 1901. As a kind of origin myth, if you like, for our program, we think about the origin of what computation is. Instead of thinking of computation just in terms of calculation, algorithm, here was it was an astronomical mechanism as well. It was a way, in essence, that thought and navigational intelligence was able to understand itself in relationship to its planetary condition. And so for us, this continues into the contemporary era with forms of computation, such as, for example, the Event Horizon Telescope that gave us the famous images of the black hole. But perhaps a little bit more closer to home, climate science. Climate science is based upon planetary computational infrastructure, from satellites to surface and oceanic temperatures to the supercomputing simulations that give us models of the past, present, and future. Indeed, we might say that the concept of climate change itself is an accomplishment of planetary computation. And so for us, in many regards, this is a kind of model for what, not just what this infrastructure is, but in many respects, what it's for. Once again, reorienting thought, intelligence, action, in relationship to understanding itself, in relationship to its planetary condition. So we are breaking then down this sort of big picture idea of computation into 5 more specific thematic areas of research, which are synthetic intelligence, recursive simulations, hemispherical stacks, synthetic catallaxy, and planetary sapience. So let me talk a little bit about what each of these, what each of these is really quickly. First, synthetic intelligence. One of the things that we observe is that thought experiments particularly within philosophy of AI, have driven the development of the technology itself. That is, the philosophy of AI and AI as a technology have evolved in a kind of coupled double helix, a process that continues today. So within this area, we'll be focusing around the issues of the fundamental issues around the emergence of machine intelligence. We're particularly focusing on issues of large language models. Recently, Blaise Aguirre-Yarcas and I, one of our affiliate researchers, published a piece in Noema looking at some of the political and philosophical implications of large language models, and I would refer you if you're more interested in the topic. Recursive simulations. Recursive simulations is an area where we're looking at the question of simulations really from sort of 2 sides at once and trying to think about how we may think of them together to try to get a handle on how simulations function as an epistemological technology, as a kind of cognitive prosthesis. On the one hand, we have scientific simulations, or things like climate science or cellular simulation or epidemiological simulations, which are forms of computational abstraction that give us some kind of direct, closer access to some kind of ground truth that would be otherwise inconceivable, otherwise unthinkable, other than through this form of computational abstraction. On the other end of the spectrum, we have things like virtual reality, augmented reality, which are just as interesting in many ways, but their purpose is not to give us access to a kind of underlying ground truth, but indeed to allow us to in a way, depart from ground truth into another kind of simulated artificial phenomenological experience. And between the two, between the access to ground truth and the departure to ground truth, is where we live. Now, the politics of simulation is, of course, thereby quite fraught and interesting. On the one hand, we might say that climate politics is in many ways an attempt to give greater political agency to the implications of large-scale computational simulation. In this case, a simulation of, for example, what the year 2050 would be like, and to mobilize resources and mobilize resources or politics or economics around preventing the implications of this simulation. Regardless, it is at basis an amplification of the deep political significance of simulation as an actor in this regard. So speaking of politics, next area is what we call hemispherical stacks, which is really looking at computation and geopolitics. So you think of things like the US-China technological delinking and disentanglement, the chip wars, and so forth. Stacks refer to a model of planetary scale computation that I introduced in a book from 2016 called The Stack on Software and Sovereignty. And the argument is that we can understand planetary scale computation not as a single giant undifferentiated machine, but rather as what I call an accidental megastructure composed of lots of different modular layers interacting with each other. One of the things that's happened since that book was published is, on the one hand, this stack model, as not only as a technical system, but indeed as a political institutional model, has become more foundational, more fortified, and more central to geopolitical dynamics, but it's also become more fragmented. A fragmentation between a North American stack, a Chinese stack, so forth and so on. The argument that we make ultimately is that this multipolarization, if you like, of planetary computation and the multipolarization of geopolitics over the last few years are in fact the same thing. They not only track each other, they are the same thing. And so with this, for this research area, we'll be working with a number of different people's perspectives on this as well. We'll also be taking the studio to Seoul in Korea working with a number of predominantly Chinese science fiction writers, as we work through some of the future, let's say geopolitical futures that we may want to address in relationship to this particular dynamic. Synthetic catallaxy. Synthetic catallaxy refers basically to computational economics, the ways in which value is identified, stored, indexed, is held in memory, and more importantly, socialized and extinguished. And the ways in which, from this perspective, value is understood as information, as something that is information that is produced, stored, indexed, and socialized, and in turn, how information itself is constructed as value. So some of the things that we'll be looking at through this particular lens have to do with issues of basic income, basic services, basic capital, planning, carbon macroeconomics, the ways in which carbon and other kinds of geochemical entities serve as a sort of basis for the identification of value, and also pricing and price signals. What kind of information can price identify? What kind of information can it not communicate? For this particular area, we're collaborating with one project, a nonprofit and foundation has particular interest in thinking about the future of economics. And so we're working with their network and some of their perspectives and people in thinking through these issues and developing our scope of alternatives. For this particular area, we'll also be decamping from our home base in Los Angeles to Mexico City. We'll be spending a few weeks in Mexico City, in fact, looking at these sets of questions from that perch and that perspective, but also speaking with and interacting with a number of Latin American thinkers, experts, economists, and technologists around this set of issues. Lastly, is what we call planetary sapiens, which is really kind of zooming out to the big picture, thinking about the questions of the emergence of computational intelligence within the longer evolutionary arc of the appearance of complex intelligence, and how, in many regards, the evolution of this intelligence in the form of the Anthropocene, or whatever your preferred terminology is in fact undermining the foundations of its own conditions, of its own preconditions, putting its own future in peril. So the question is, what are the forms of intelligence that would be the precondition to a more viable planetary, one in which that would be able to thrive and survive into a longer term future? Some of these ideas were more specifically laid out in another essay in Noema called Planetary Sapiens, which I would refer you to dig into some of the complexities of the topic. So those are the 5 areas in which we're focusing on. Let me introduce then, in many ways, sort of let's say the stars of our initiative, which is the associate researchers. We have put together what I think is a really incredible roster of participants, of associate researchers for the launch of the program. They represent some of the most interesting and vital philosophers of technology, philosophers of the planetary, technologists, research scientists, architects, designers, artists, science fiction writers, an incredible group of people that together in some way, when you sort of see the entire mosaic, seems to add up to something like an emergent school of thought, particularly around, obviously, these questions of computation, and indeed what computation is for, as in relationship to its planetary condition and our own condition. So just picking a few of the names to give you a little bit of a sense of some of the diversity of disciplinary perspectives that we're bringing to bear within the research that we do. Some of the affiliate researchers include Achille Mbembe, author of Necropolitics, and recently the director of innovation for the Foundation of Democracy in Johannesburg. Lucy McRae, the artist, architect, and filmmaker, also visiting professor at SCI-Arc. Juliana Bidinori, the professor of philosophy at Stanford, who is also the director of the Stanford Basic Income Lab. Dipesh Chakrabarty, historian at University of Chicago, author of Climate of History and a Planetary Age, preeminent theorist of thinking through questions of the planetary through post-colonialism. Matilda Marcoli, mathematician at Caltech, who you may know through her pseudonym, writing pseudonym of Aurora Ippolito, someone who's done really interesting work, not only in theory of mathematics and calculation, but also art and economics as well. Clapperton Chakanessa Mavunga for Science and Technology Studies at MIT. Someone who does an extraordinarily interesting work on the non-Western history of technologies and the conditions of knowledge and application of these technologies, and someone that we've been in dialogue with for some time around the implication of this for the construction of a truly planetary theory of computation. Nick Cernick from King's College London, co-author with Alex Williams of Inventing the Future, Post-Capitalism in a World Without Work, someone that we've been working with and thinking with for quite some time about how it is that computational economics may be reseen and reconceived. Chen Kuifan, or Stanley Chen, the Chinese Shanghai-based science fiction writer, author of Waste Tide and with Kai-Fu Lee AI 2041. With Stanley will be one of our chief partners for the hemispherical stacks team in thinking through the basis for some of the geopolitical futures that we'd like to develop further and like to imagine and conceive with him and a group of other writers. Helen Hester, author of Xenofeminism, someone we've been working with and thinking with for some time about the relationship between technology and the body, technology and experience, and the ways in which the sort of fundamental conditions of understanding what it means to be human are being remade in ways that are both exciting and dangerous. So these are just some of the over 75 affiliate researchers that we've invited to be part of the program that our studio researchers would be collaborating with over the course of the 5 months. For the full roster of names and bios of the affiliate researchers, please go to Antikythera.xyz, and we've listed all of those people with their bios there. And I look forward to hearing from you about who it is that you may be most excited about collaborating with. So let me then, after this preamble, turn to, in many ways, sort of the why we're here, which is to talk about the studio researchers, the application process, how we envision the role of the studio researchers within the program, who should apply, how they should apply, what they'll be doing, and so forth and so on. All of this is, again, on our website. You can read through this if you like. Let me just sort of do some highlights of here as well. The speculative design studio, in many ways, as we sort of see it, it's a philosophy seminar that's done through a design methodology. Sort of philosophy is a way of doing design. And also a design studio that generates new philosophy, or design as a way of doing philosophy. And it's both of these together in many respects. And so the seminar laboratory studio dynamic that will sort of shift over the course of a week or even over the course of a day is kind of the method by which the program will be structured over the sequence of over the 5 months, which means that it needs to be almost by definition deeply interdisciplinary. We're looking for the 18 researchers that we will be bringing to Los Angeles. We're looking for people from a wide range of disciplinary backgrounds, professional backgrounds, and creative backgrounds. Not just philosophers, but also designers, programmers, scientists, political scientists, filmmakers. We want to create a cohort that is heterogeneous, that is dynamic, that will allow the studio to do lots of different kinds of projects, to do lots of different kinds of research. We're not looking for a kind of ideal type and then 17 more clones of that ideal type. We're looking for a team. We're looking for a cohort. We're looking for a group that can collaborate and work together in ways that the whole will be greater than the sum of the parts, for sure. The program will be primarily based in Los Angeles at the Bradbury Building downtown, which I'll show you in a moment, over the course of the 5 months. We will also then be departing for a month or so in the middle of that 5 months, where we'll be going first to Mexico City, where we'll be working on the synthetic catallaxy research, and then to Seoul in South Korea, where we'll be working on the hemispherical stacks researchers. The program, as you know, is fully funded. The studio researchers their housing will be covered in Los Angeles, and they will be paid a $4,000 a month stipend relative to location, in order for them to be able to participate full-time in the program. It really is a full-time program. It's a full-time commitment. Your days and hours will be filled with lectures and seminars and workshops and studio time and crits and discussion. It's a year packed into 5 months, but it's really an extraordinary time, I promise you. Applications are open until November 11th. And the information you'll need, the FAQ and the rest of this, is once again at Antikythera.xyz. The key email is apply@Antikythera.xyz. Nikolai Boyajev, who you'll hear from in a moment, is the studio director, who will be with all of the studio researchers for the complete duration of the program. I will be there for most of the time. A lot of the other affiliate researchers will be there in groups and one-on-one, and the whole time it'll be a very busy and dynamic circulation of people and of ideas and of work. So just as a quick overview then of our calendar, applications opened on October 4th. The application window closes on November 11th. We will then choose, as I say, a group of, let's say, semi-finalists of people who we think might be a good fit for the program in this first year. We will arrange Zoom interviews with those people, get into a little bit of a deeper discussion about the interest in the program, the kind of work that they're interested in doing. We will let the studio participants know about our decision. Everyone confirmed as participants by December 11th. And so you've got a little bit of time to organize your time in your life in order to arrive in Los Angeles for the start of the studio program on January 30th, which will begin. I'll be doing a long seminar with everyone, sort of laying out in much more detail the whole scope of the program, who we'll be working with, what we'll be doing with them, and how all of these moving parts fit together. That will begin a sort of beginning of a 2-month, let's say, foundation phase, which will be around a kind of our own history of computation, around topics of synthetic intelligence, around topics of recursive simulation. We'll then be going through what we call our fieldwork phase, which is our trips to Mexico City and Seoul. And then when we come back to Los Angeles, where we'll be splitting our time between the Bradbury Building and SCI-Arc, the Southern California Institute of Architecture School downtown, which has very generously given us access to their quite remarkable space in downtown Los Angeles. And in this third phase, we'll be continuing to be doing more of the thematic research, but we'll also be developing some of the larger, let's say, higher production projects along the way. One thing I should say then, in terms of the project cycle, is that what we'll be doing is that we'll have think of it kind of like a week or 10 days of very intensive inputs, seminars and symposia and discussions and lectures and workshops, and something like roughly 2 weeks of a speculative sort of design studio, the speculative design studio, of the process of producing projects in relationship to that input, in relationship to this. One for synthetic intelligence, one we'll do this for recursive simulations, again for hemispherical stacks, and so on and so on. People will be working in groups of 3, the 18. So 6 groups of 3 will be working on each of these 5 areas. And you will be mixed up. So you're not going to be working with the same people on every group along the way. The goal is by the end of the studio, you will have collaborated on one of these quick projects with everyone else in the studio. And then for the final projects, you know, those final teams will be aligned as well. But what that means is, in the construction of these 6 projects around each of these themes, plus the final, we'll have something like a portfolio of something like 30 projects that will represent how the cohort of studio researchers, along with the affiliate researchers, has processed everything that's at stake in relationship to these issues and rotated that into a portfolio of propositional concepts and ideas that will be manifest in forms of cinema, manifest in forms of theory and text, in software and new software prototypes and software models, in terms of policy propositions, and a whole range of sort of forms and formats to be determined in relationship to each of these groups. But to be clear, it's a philosophy program, but it's a philosophy program, the output of which is the speculative design, or if you want to think of it, you know, really the other way around. Okay, so a few then key points in relationship to some of the questions that we had fielded a little bit earlier. The program is deeply interdisciplinary. It is also international. We invite applicants from not just the United States, but from wherever there is interest. Obviously, there are issues with entry to the United States that will need to be considered in that regard. But we are 100% looking for the most international cohort we possibly can. The projects, both in terms of these interim projects along the way and the final project at the end, will take multiple forms and formats. Whatever your skill set is that you would bring to the table is one that we will work with and we'll make use of, that you'll be able to engage with and collaborate with some of the other studio researchers to produce work that is original and provocative. There are no specific fixed prerequisites for the applicants of the program. It's not like you absolutely must have a PhD or absolutely must have a master's degree or a terminal degree or absolutely must have a certain age range or a certain criteria. Again, we're looking for like a really kind of diverse mix of interesting, talented, analytic and creative minds. And so there's just different professional tracks these people that group of people would have followed. And so if you're concerned about this is there is no sort of set issue. We're looking for sort of top people from academic backgrounds, professional backgrounds, and creative backgrounds, and ideally people who have at least two of those three in some kind of combination. But none of these three is really necessarily prioritized in relationship to the other. Someone who's been working in industry for quite some time does not have a greater or lesser advantage over someone who's been working in a creative field or an academic field, and vice versa. In terms of the kind of structure of the kinds of, let's say, the kind of culture of learning together in the context of the program, you're going to see that there's moments in which it's functioning very much like a studio, a design studio, other moments where it's functioning very much like a seminar, other moments where it's functioning more like a laboratory, and other moments where it's functioning more like field research. And it's the movement between these very quickly in relationship to each other and being able to think and act and make and do in relationship to these different kinds of modalities of engagement very quickly is the process by which the speculative design work that we're able to produce, and indeed the kind of philosophy and the kind of concepts we're able to project, achieves both its escape velocity, let's say, and also its sort of tone of its originality. So a few more logistical things. The program is full-time. It is a full-time commitment. It is, not necessarily 24/7, but it is definitely a deeply immersive experience. And which is part of why the program is fully funded, and so that people's will be able to participate without having their attention divided among other commitments. The program is in person. Some of the affiliate researchers will be joining us and joining the discussion over Zoom, but not the studio researchers. The studio researchers will be together in person in Los Angeles, and then going to Mexico City in Seoul together. The projects will be based on briefs that Nikolai and I and others and some of the affiliate researchers are composing in relationship to the discussions that we're having. The works will be done in groups of teams of 3, and again, in this kind of sequence of cycles of 5. Two sort of points of difference and clarification. This is not an education program like the Strelka program that Nikolai and I were and others were involved with. It is a program in which there are affiliate and studio researchers who are working together and collaborating on projects as well. And so it's not a faculty-student kind of dynamic. It is a much more collaborative dynamic. It's also not a residency. It's not a program in which someone will come with a project that they would like to develop on their own and then spend the 5 months with us in Los Angeles developing that project. We want to develop these projects together. There's a collective intelligence to the logic of the studio that we will activate with the affiliate researchers together in order to do work that we could not have done on our own. And that's really the goal here. The program will be at the Bradbury Building downtown, which some of you probably know from its starring role in the original Blade Runner. The Berggruen Institute has most of the top 4th floor of the Bradbury Building, and our studio will be just across the open area from the Berggruen Institute there as well. So the market is right across the street. You'll be right in the middle of the heart downtown Los Angeles in one of the most extraordinarily beautiful buildings in North America. So that's it for me. Let me just say thanks also to the Antikythera organization. This program is a collaboration of a number of extraordinary people with an extraordinary range of talents. Emily Knapp, Jaden Clemens are our senior program managers. Metahaven and Andrei Karabanov worked with on developing the website and the brand identity and all the communications going forward. Stephanie Sherman and Ben Cerveny, who you met, are our associate directors of the program. And I will be fielding the questions and answers now with Nikolai Voyajev, who is our studio director. So let me stop sharing screen, and then we will we'll get right to it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Benjamin. We're going to go ahead and start the Q&A. I'll be fielding questions, throwing them at the team. We've received a lot of questions during the registration period, so we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. Also, please go ahead and throw your questions into the Q&A here on the Zoom. We're going to get through as many questions as we can. Please follow up at apply@Antikythera.xyz if we don't get to your question today. So first question, Nikolai. Benjamin said it, but I think folks don't believe us. What are the prerequisites that are required to join the program? And further, if you might want to delve into what would make, sort of the best application for someone who maybe is coming from an alternative background, maybe not the academic space, but is really interested in the topic. I think folks want to know what can they do to stand out during the application process.
Right. Thank you, Jade, and thank you, Benjamin, and thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Nikolai. I'll be directing the studio track of the Antikythera program. The short answer would be that honestly, there would be no prerequisites in the traditional sense. We encourage really everyone to apply, both people from every discipline, every background, both from emerging and sort of established practices. Basically, when in doubt, apply. As long as you have 2 letters of reference and a strong interest, professional and personal interest in the themes that we've outlined on the website and then to the sort of articles that Benjamin referred to, we strongly encourage you to apply and join our cohort. It's true that Benjamin said it, but I'll just also reiterate it. We're not looking, like there's no grids of points and all sorts of different metrics for choosing the 18 people that are the closest to archetype Antikythera Newford model candidate. We're really trying to basically build a studio, build a cohort, build a group. And as we sort of referred to in the past as well, it's closer to casting a play or cooking a meal with different ingredients and different kind of profiles rather than essentially trying to replicate 17, 18 people of one type. So that's why it's kind of hard to say what we're really looking for. We're waiting to see who applies, and that's why we're encouraging really everyone to throw in their other application and then join us here. I hope that clarifies.
I would like to think it does. Another question we're seeing a lot, what do you really mean by full-time commitment? Are folks gonna be able to sleep? Are they gonna have a Saturday or two where they can have some personal time? And particularly if you could speak to maybe how you envision folks with families being able to participate, if they can, that would be great to speak to in answering that question as to what a full-time commitment is.
Well, it is pretty full time. I mean, it's 5 months. It's a bit of a, it's not a sprint, and so we're cognizant of the needs of people's ability to be able to participate with full focus of this as well. But it will be it will be 5 or 6 days a week, mostly 5 days a week in many regards. But we will be doing trips and other kinds of things on weekends as well. It's going to be running all day. It really is a kind of full-time dynamic. We're packing in a lot of lectures, a lot of workshops, a lot of studio time, working on projects, a lot of crit time, and it's a cycle that goes every day. And this as well. Each of these themes will work a little bit differently in a dynamic. It will, we'll mix it up quite a lot. But it really is full time. In terms of family, I think it really is a case-by-case basis. I have a son in high school, and and it's always a bit of the slicing and structuring of the time commitments is always a big part of the day. I think it really is a case-by-case basis. There may be some people who decide that for the period of the 5 months, this is not necessarily it's not going to necessarily be manageable for them. And for other people, the idea of bringing some of their family to Los Angeles for the 5 months is great, would be, you know, a great opportunity. Housing is covered as part of the program. And so again, I would think of it, you know, a little bit more of a case-by-case basis, depending on people's circumstance.
Great. Does anyone else want to add to that, or should we jump to the next question? Okay, so sorry, Nikolai, you did just mention that 2 recommendation letters are required. I believe, I'll just call this out. I believe on the site, it only says 1. Can we just confirm how many recommendation letters are required?
Yeah, I might have said 2, but I think we can keep it at 1. Of course, there's no limits to the reference letters, so as many letters as you think are appropriate. Yeah, I think.
Okay, great. No worries. So another question we've seen a lot is how will folks that are studio researchers collaborate with the associate researchers in order to drive the actual outputs? To that, I think what people are really trying to get at is, will my personal interests, my personal work be able to be embodied in the final outputs, or will this be more directed by either the leadership or the associate researcher's own body of work? To what extent will there be kind of give and take and ability for the studio researcher to really drive the outputs?
Well, I think those are actually 2 different questions. The first question around the collaboration with the affiliate researchers, it will be quite close. Is that, you know, not all of the affiliate researchers will be coming to Los Angeles for an extended time, but many of them will. Most of them will, and you'll be meeting them and working with them in person. Part of the way we're also structuring the program is to bring the affiliate researchers together. There are a number of people who, as we see it, are working on, you know, if you kind of go below the surface at the fundamental issue, you know, the fundamental intellectual drive of their work is connected with that of others, but they may be coming at it from different disciplinary perspectives. And so finding ways to seed new work, new collaborations, new discourse, new dynamics in relationship to these projects is part of the function of the program. And so studio researchers will be right in the middle of this, right in the thick of this, and working with them in this way as well. In terms of the sort of the shorter projects that we'll be developing together, it's going to be a mix. It's going to be a mix. In some cases, it may work really well that you'll have affiliate researchers, you know, working with you on the project as another team member. In other cases, it may be just you and the other 3 working together, and what that dynamic will look like will again be a little bit different on a little bit of a case-by-case basis. But for sure, the way in which we envision the program is not really a kind of faculty-student dynamic, but rather 2 different kinds of communities of researchers with 2 different sort of sets of kind of roles to play within a larger collaboration. And so it is our, you know, it's our heartfelt hope that the platform of the program can seed a lot of those deep collaborations around together. So that's sort of the first question. The second question is, the people that we would choose to bring to be as studio researchers to bring to be part of the program would be people that we want to learn from, not just people that we want to teach or that we are sort of have access to. And so we want people whose ideas we think will make for essential, interesting contributions to the discourse that we are constructing together. However, as I said, it's not, and so not only are you invited in order to sort of bring your work and your ideas and your background, like that's the point. Like this is what we hope to amplify. At the same time, I'll say it's not a residency. The work that we'll be doing will be collaborative. The work that we'll be doing will be based on the discourse, the focus, the research, the themes that we are constructing together. Part of Nikolai and I's role is to produce some kind of generative constraints in relationship to the production of the production of these as well. But within this, by all means, like we want, you know, like maximum creativity, maximum response, maximum pushback. This is all part of the process of trying to create something new and to do something that people haven't seen before.
Great. One question we keep seeing, will there be future studio cohorts in 2024 and beyond, or is this a one and done studio?
I think we sure, no, just again, the short of it is that we certainly hope so. So of course, if you can't apply this year, we would encourage you to stay in touch, so to say, and join us in the future iterations of the program cycle.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just reiterate that as well. You know, as Nicola and I know full well, the world is unpredictable, and sometimes the best laid plans in terms of the development of the program don't always go as you indicate, as you might expect. The world intervenes in different kinds of ways. However, our goal for Antikythera is to build something longer term. like the issues that we've identified here about the role of computation, and particularly planetary computation, in the transformation of our societies, our economies. It's the ways in which we model and understand our cultures in relationship to the ecosystems and planetary conditions from which they emerge, and in which they are intervening for better or worse. These are long-term issues. These are issues that are not going to be solved in 1 year. They're not going to be around this as well. And our goal is for the program to become a kind of center of gravity, a kind of school of thought around ways in which we can understand these topics, intervene in these topics, compose alternatives in relationship to these kinds of topics. And so that's something almost by definition will take a number of cycles to kind of go through. And so I think from our perspective, we're in it for the long haul.
Great. We had this question actually more than once. Can folks apply as a duo or a team if they're part of a creative studio or something of the like, or do folks need to apply individually?
I think we covered this also in the questions on the website, but we would actually encourage everyone to apply as individuals. Of course, it's very possible that both members are actually accepted, but because we're trying to build a cohort around a series of interests that are coming from different directions, it's not that you would be applying as a duo. You're really applying as an individual to bring your voice and once again create ideas in the program, as opposed to bring a practice into the program to pursue an existing body of work.
Yeah, I'll just echo that. I mean, people will apply as individuals, but every individuals is sort of will be evaluated on sort of, you know, on individual terms. And in some cases, the fact that they have this close working relationship with the other person would be part of the evaluation process. And to kind of understood, like, is there a way in which perhaps, you know, the coupling is, there's a greater, you know, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts in a kind of way, is something you keep in mind as you begin to think about this. However, each person should apply with an individual application.
Great. And we've touched on this a bit, and maybe it's not fully fleshed out, but I think folks would love to understand a little more what the end products of the studio are intended to look like, or what they could look like, maybe some examples.
Sure. To be discovered. However, and I think one way to think about it a little bit is each of these 5 thematic areas may lend itself to different kinds of projects. Kinds of projects that are looking around different kinds of computational economic models may look, and by necessity need to be rather different than kinds of projects that are looking around the, you know, going deeply into this question of planetary sapience. That said, the kinds of forms and formats that the projects will eventuate in will be quite diverse. One of the ways in which in some of the previous programs that Nicola and I have directed at Stroke and other places, cinema was used as a kind of communicative wrapper for a lot of ideas, where the sort of short cinematic films that begin as research, that turn into keynotes, that then become movies, that become a way of organizing a kind of dense and reticulated proposition in a kind of short format, is something I'm sure that we are going to explore. At the same time, though, one of the ways we see this, the program is a bit of a kind of taking the architecture studio model and thinking about how you could use that to develop new ideas for software. And so not just taking computation as a topic, but as computation as a medium for how philosophy, you know, projects itself, how thought projects, how conceptualization of how systems could be different than they are, would be eventuated in the form of prototype software, which is a lot of what Ben Cerveny and others will be thinking through with us as well. We also, by definition, as a philosophy program, will have a lot of writers. You know, I happen to believe that the best design software is a word processor, but that's my personal bias here. And so, between text and software and cinema and other kinds of forms and formats, I think we will be able to put together a portfolio of works and a portfolio of ideas that adds up to a kind of meta proposition, a kind of universe of ideas in which each one is more compelling, more valuable, because it's situated in relationship to all of the others. And that's really, in any way, the kind of the bigger goal for trying to do this diversity of projects in this particular kind of way, is that you get, instead of 30 of the exact versions of the same thing, you get something that actually feels like a world. It has the difference in complexity and tone and texture of a lot of different ways of looking at the problems.
Can I just add something to that to double down on that question as a recovering architect, as in like why the studio model is based on the architecture studio model. Of course, it's because of as Benja was mentioning, to apply the mode of thinking away from buildings and cities onto software, but it's also to kind of divorce a little bit the modes of thinking and the experimental culture of an architectural practice away or give it a certain autonomy from the professional applications of like building a building, like using this kind of thinking to generate ideas and a discourse around ideas as opposed to building a solution, quote unquote, or a particular building. This is important because as the program isn't an art residency, it also isn't an incubator for like projects to therefore like basically be pitched at the final sort of deadline to apply for funding. So that's an important point to keep in mind, that although the formats will be various, we're not looking at essentially replicating some of the pathologies of design, solutionist design culture of like, here it is after 5 months of working, the solution to this or that particular problem, but really shifting the way that we maybe conceptualize the problem in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's right. Shifting the ways in which the problems are understood, the ways in which they're conceptualized, but also sort of producing a kind of map of the contemporary, a map of the moment that is as complex as reality, as complex as what it's trying to describe in different kinds of ways. I think a lot of ways I'll just think this also goes to a little bit of the question of the applicants here as well. From academia, from professional backgrounds, from creative backgrounds, we're confident that there's a lot of really smart, talented people that are spinning their wheels, that are in a place in which their gifts are not really being able to be expressed in the ways in which they know they should be. That they realize that these issues and related issues are ones that have a kind of fundamental existential significance in terms of what the rest of their lives looks like and what the rest of all of our lives work like together. And they may have thought at some point over the course of their time, frustrated, daydreaming, that there must be some place in which they could go and work with people who are as creative and smart and talented and committed as they are, who that they can learn from, who they can teach, who they can actually engage with these topics at a really, really fundamental level without simplification. I hope that that's what this invitation is. I hope the invitation to participate in this program will make good on that curiosity that people may have.
Great. I'm going to go back to more of a fundamental question regarding, again, this full-time status. Do you think folks will be able to work part-time or remotely if they already have jobs that they don't want to leave while they're participating in the studio program, or would that not be advisable?
I would say that the honest answer is no, for many of the reasons sort of outlined before, but also for the fact that the program is entirely collaborative, collaborative with the other studio researchers, collaborative with all the other affiliate researchers, and therefore it's slightly unfair we want everyone to be committed fully during the 5 months so that they can basically be good collaborators to their peers and to their sort of collaborators. So for that reason, we will highly privilege people who are able to make the full-time commitments over the 5 months.
Great. When folks are completing the application, I know they have to submit portfolio, answer a few questions. Is there a particular way they might be able to clarify the types of research that they personally want to ensure they bring to the table during the studio? Is there an ideal way for them to communicate what their personal goals or personal desires are in the application process?
Yes. I mean, I think a lot of the interview process will be based around what is it about the agenda that we've set forth that you really want to, that you feel that you are best suited to work on, that you will bring something to this discussion that we wouldn't have, that would be invaluable to the development of the studio and this as well. And so how it is that people see themselves in as working as part of the Antikythera program, how they imagine themselves in relation to the Antikythera program, has everything to do with how they see the Antikythera program and what they see as the sort of the aspects of it that are most important to them, and everyone will see it somewhat differently. So not only is that something that they could communicate, I think it's essential for them to communicate and for us to understand about how we might work together. At the same time, the question is less about like, what is a project that this person is working on that they could come and incubate here? That's really not the way in which we're talking about it. It's more like, are there ideas that may have inspired a project that you're working on that you're deeply committed to, and you want to bring that ideas and motivation to a new context to work on in a new way to do different kinds of work? Absolutely, this is an essential part of that conversation.
Great. We've gotten this question actually a couple of times, may have been the same person or not, but folks are curious about the partnership with One Project, how that developed and how you see Antikythera fitting into One Project's work.
Yeah, sure. So One Project is a very interesting organization. We've been collaborating with and thinking through, particularly a lot of the ideas, as I mentioned, around synthetic catallaxy with them for some time. My conversations with Justin Rosenstein, Raphael Arar, and some of the other people there at One Project have focused around this, like this area of the future of economics, and particularly the future of computational economics. If you know a little bit about the background of that foundation, they happen to know a thing or two about building very large platforms, which is one of the reasons why we are really excited to be working with them. They have networks, they have global networks, they have different kinds of people that they're in contact with that we'll be able to bring into the program. But in many ways, we really, like, one of their key agendas is rethinking platform scale economics in ways that are more, that are more genuinely viable in all connotations of that term. And it just became a kind of meeting of minds around this notion of synthetic catallaxy, which was originally introduced in the Stack book, and we really look forward to working with them, particularly around this particular area, and for them to challenge our thinking, for ours to challenge theirs.
Great. So going back to logistics, sorry, we're hopping around here a bit with these questions. Folks want to understand a little more about what housing covered means. Do you have any more, I guess, direction at the moment as to what exactly the housing situation will look like for folks on the ground?
I can try to take this. It's a little, but Nicola, just because I happen to know a little bit closer to this conversation, we're still working it out in a sort of way. I think what we'd like to do is provide a situation in which the question of housing for people is solved for them. Like, our goal, we are sort of working through some of the final logistics, but the goal for this is that were someone to be suggested, that if someone would be accepted into the program, that they be able to know that when they land in Los Angeles, there's a key waiting for them. And that they're not spending a fair bit of time negotiating the complexity of the LA rental market at present. This is our goal. That may not be the best solution for most people. For some people, they may say that, you know what, I'd really rather find my own place. I'd really rather sort of do this as well. And so we want to be flexible, but at the same time, in order to make sure that the best solution meets for different people's needs. But our goal is to make housing a non-issue for people as much as possible. Yeah.
Great. Another question regarding prerequisites. Just to be sure, is there an age limit for this program?
I think you should probably be 18. We don't have a protocol for parental, parental consent forms on this as well, but no, I think really, honestly, within this, like, we would like, I don't think there is, I think the age really should be quite open. I think there's different people from different types of, have different life experiences who have done different kinds of things. There may be people in the program to where they are, young geniuses that, will come in and set the world on fire once they leave our program. And there may be other people who have built a lot of the infrastructure that we're talking about, who have been part of this last this generation that has built planetary computation, knows a lot about it, and has invested their life in it, and is deeply interested in how it is that it could be reoriented in different kinds of ways. And I think the program will benefit from having that complexity and diversity of perspectives.
Great. One question back to logistics. This might be a little bit of a tougher one, but quite a few folks from different corners of the globe want to understand what visas may be required of them in order to participate.
I guess I'll take this again. people will have to be able to enter the United States in order to in the program. Like there's ways in which we may be able to help with this, but for the most part, people should have the ability to enter the United States in order to participate in this first year of the program. The way in which we've structured the program, I should say, which is important in terms of how people may choose to solve that problem. The ways in which we've structured the program is that you'll be in Los Angeles for 2 months at the beginning. Then we will be going to Mexico City and Seoul, which have much easier visa entry requirements. And then we'll be coming back to Los Angeles for 2 months. So it's two 2-month blocks in the United States. The tourist visa for the United States lasts 90 days. Keep this in mind.
I think that's a fair answer to the question for now. So we are heading up against the final few minutes here of the Q&A session. I think we have largely covered just about all of the questions that came in. If we did not get to your question, please go ahead and shoot us an email at apply@Antikythera.xyz, and we are doing our best to respond to folks in a timely fashion for any questions folks submit there. So with that, Benjamin, let me hand it to you to give the final word here and close us out.
Sure. Thank you, Jade. The final word, I just want to say thanks to Stephanie, thanks to Nikolai, and thanks to Ben, thanks to Emily, Haven, Andre, the organization that we together with. We're growing quickly. The organization itself has been, something we've stood up relatively quickly. But I'm grateful to the time and commitment that everybody's made towards trying to realize this vision, and I look forward to growing this organization, growing the Antikythera community by multiples of 10, starting in February, and to beginning this new adventure and project with you all, and can't wait to see where this goes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, everyone. And we record this session, so we plan to make it publicly available if we can, and look forward to receiving these applications ahead of November 11th. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.